Research Institute, Andishe Online-Germany, AOG. Themes from the University. Theme 7. Dualism, two energy sources in the universe. Part 4, Origin of Unknown Viruses. Second last part. Introduction. Dear friends and interested parties at the Research Institute Andishe Online-Germany, AOG. As mentioned in other articles, the age of Heisenberg's quantum worldview is being replaced by the integrated sciences. Integrated sciences are a special form of the teachings of Master Elohi founded by academic sciences such as mathematics, physics, biology, genetics, etc. The thoughts of the integrated sciences are capable of correctly analyzing the universe and the creation of beings and the logic within it, and explaining the purpose of creation in a tangible, scientific, rational, and acceptable way. In this context, we have tried to prove this assertion with various articles and in various languages on the website of the Research Institute Andishe Online-Germany, AOG. Because we believe that a new era has begun in which the basis of thought on planet Earth is gradually being changed in all respects, thus creating a new world order. In this article, we have tried to analyze the reason for the emergence of beings called emerging viruses. In future articles, after presenting a study on a true self and the correct definition and explanation of the psyche, we will deal with this topic in more detail. Disruption of the balance of power on Earth. On planet Earth, the balance of power is disturbed in favor of positronic effects in comparison to the entire universe, but in any case, there is a special kind of balance between the two energy sources. From now on, the subject inevitably becomes somewhat complicated, and in order to understand this, readers should maintain their attention. Every biological system has a kind of balance of power between light, electron, and darkness, positron. If this balance is disturbed by external factors in favor of the electronic or positronic source, creatures from this or the other world are created. It is outside the usual biological interactions, since this kind of appearance of microscopic beings depends a lot on the human way of life. Definition of electron volt. The energy gained by a particle with the electric charge of an electron when accelerated in a vacuum above a tension of 1 volt. In simple terms, the size of an electron volt corresponds to the energy of an electron at a tension of 1 volt. Please pay attention to this equation. In order not to deviate from the academic sciences, we also use this mathematical physical concept to explain the degree of energy difference between the two sources. Pay attention to this graph. If changes in the environment of a system add up to 1 electron volt to the energy level of one of the two sources, the equilibrium is disrupted in favor of that source. By disrupting the current equilibrium in this system, simple quantomagnetics quickly grow into very complex macroquantomagnetics. As described in the article Emergence of Instinctive Features and Characters, a macroquantomagnet can appear on 2 levels. To investigate these 2 levels, we need to analyze the matter a bit more deeply. Quantum formation of a macroquantomagnet. In the positronic world, the attraction for GaN is due to the attack and force of an anti-macroquantomagnetic, a negative property. This is usually an attribute that determines the way the system interacts with the environment. For example, a scorpion stings and kills its prey under the influence of profit attraction. Under normal circumstances, this characteristic occurs only in behavior. Material origin of a macroquantomagnetism. If a lot of energy is generated from outside by one electron volt in a certain system, so that the balance is disrupted in favor of the positronic source, this world can now create its own beings. For example, a harmful foursome, whose biological inclinations function in exactly the opposite direction to the world of light, i.e. human biological activities. Therefore, we are talking here about two different opposing forces, i.e. the profit attraction and loss rejection forces of the positronic world, negative source, and the electronic world, positive source. I know that this subject is a bit complicated and not easy to understand, because many of the facts involved have to be explained, including, for example, how the balance between the two energy sources is disrupted, what factors are involved at all, and so on. For this reason, and in order to make the matter fully understandable, we are, in our view, investigating the occurrence of epidemic and pandemic diseases and also the reasons for their occurrence. Accordingly, we present the consequent conclusions. Historical epidemics and pandemics. For the moment, we will ignore traditional diseases and the frequency of their occurrence, as we will investigate this more closely in the future. Here, for specific reasons, we are dealing with diseases which arose at a particular time and have left millions of victims in their wake. Let us first look at some of these diseases. 1. The Black Death in the years 1347 to 1350 with about 25 million victims. 2. A smallpox epidemic among American Indians around 1518 claimed millions of lives. The disease was brought to the country by European immigrants. 3. The Spanish flu between March 1919 and June 1920 with between 50 and 100 million victims. 4. AIDS, which began around the early 20th century and killed more than 30 million people by 2009. 5. Ebola, an African disease that killed tens of thousands of people in Sudan and Zaire in 1976. 6. Coronavirus in December 2019 in Wuhan, China. The pandemic is so severe that it damaged China's relations with many countries in the world and killed thousands of people in a short period of time. The disease is still spreading very rapidly. The appearance of all the above-mentioned types of viruses, which were unknown to scientists at that time, is due to the imbalance between the electronic and positronic worlds. At this point, it should be noted that the purpose of this article is not to examine the root cause of these diseases from a medical point of view, but rather to show scientifically how serious it can become when the relative balance between the two sources is disrupted in a negative direction. For example, because of economic interests or other selfish and aggressive actions that lead to the destruction of the environment. The positronic energy predominates. Last week, I saw a documentary film on YouTube. It was about a very large Dutch poultry farm, compared to German poultry farms, as can be seen in these pictures from the documentary. These Dutch chickens are in the dark and surrounded by chickens that have died from disease where they cannot move because of their excessive density. Furthermore, these chickens are not allowed outside, which means that they are deprived of nature. They do not get the sunlight or fresh air they need. They are kept in very miserable conditions. Most of these chickens are infected, which causes their feathers to fall off. Living in these conditions is obviously contrary to what nature intended for these animals. However, the process that takes place is that the body of this animal receives negative effects from the environment in the cage through the sensory organs and transmits them to the soul. Since the information received in the soul is exclusively positronic energy, the balance in favor of the positronic source is disrupted. As a result, the animal's immune system is weakened and parasites, which are positronic creatures, are created in the body by an increase in dark energy. To alleviate this problem, poultry farmers feed them with anti-parasitic drugs that double the mental problem, and although this prevents the formation of parasites, these positronic effects are transferred to the eggs of these chickens and remain in the eggs and meat. As far as we humans are concerned, I think it's clear that by consuming these eggs or the meat, these positronic effects are transferred into the human blood, where, together with other negative effects that have entered the human bloodstream in a similar form, they produce positronic organisms at a certain point in time. Among other effects are the above-mentioned viruses. Fact A plus Fact E plus Fact F plus Fact J equals new virus. What has actually happened is nothing other than the disturbance of the balance between the two sources, caused by humans themselves in favor of the positronic source, which gives the positronic world the opportunity to create its own being, in this case a new virus. Because these effects are not transmissible to one person or a specific group, but to a large number of people, the disease becomes an epidemic or even pandemic. These two opposing worlds all over the universe are trying to get information from the opposite world, so as soon as we humans succeeded in producing a medicine against the virus, it is announced to the dark world and the necessary information is stored in a special database. As a result, as soon as this world is dominant again, a new bioorganism, virus, will be created which is more perfect or at least different from the previous one. We have analyzed this topic thoroughly and scientifically in the section Integrated Sciences. It should be noted that it is not only one factor that can cause such diseases. A number of such causes must be linked together in order to acquire sufficient power and knowledge to create such beings. Relative balance between energy sources. Everywhere in the human body, there is a multitude of microbiomes. If there are no interfering factors between the two energy sources, too many of these microscopic creatures are actually useful and continue to function according to the instinctive responsibilities as recorded in the basic knowledge of creation. This means that under normal conditions, the natural biological life of these organisms functions in the direction of the health of the biological bodies of humans, animals, and even plants. If one day science can stabilize this balance, disease will disappear from the world, which seems to be a myth at this time. However, this relative balance also prevents these organisms from becoming malignant. But if this is the case, the electronic beings in the system can restore the conditions to their original state with the available amount of electronic energy. I am aware that the concept of the opinion below may not be to the taste of some doctors, but scientists who have been working in the laboratory for many years support the theory. Due to the relative balance maintained in the biological body between the two sources, diseases that are not of genetic origin and are not caused by an accident are treated naturally by the body itself. Medications do not make the situation worse. They definitely have no healing effect without side effects. Electronic energy is dominant. If the balance between energy sources is disrupted in favor of electronic energy, light beings with special positive characteristics from a human point of view are created. A concrete example is the famous cashmere wool from goats that live at the foot of the Himalayas. Some studies show that this type of wool not only has a very delicate, very stable, light and soft texture, but also has positive effects on heart function. It is generally believed that cashmere fabrics are of unparalleled quality and that wearing them creates a satisfying feeling in people. In our opinion at the University of Perfection, these effects, which are not yet publicly known, are due to the special spiritual condition of the Himalayas, which has also had an impact on the climate and ecosystem of the region. These electronic effects have upset the balance between the two energy sources in favor of electronic energy and have created many useful properties. The second example is the Ganges or Ganges, which is heavily polluted in the middle and lower river reaches, especially near large Indian cities. However, according to studies by some world-renowned researchers, the presence of a powerful antivirus in these waters is certain. The mere fact that millions of Indians bathe in the Ganga every year, and according to the report of some famous Indian mystics, no one falls ill during this bathing, suggests that the disruption of the balance between the two sources because of God's will increases the electronic energy and thus produces the light beings. One of the reasons for the disruption of these two energy sources in favor of the world of light is the attention of millions of people to the origin of the creation that God's will awakens. After internally boiling, when he regained consciousness, wherever he looked there was only darkness. In this darkness that was called dark world, he saw a piece of light that split the darkness like a sunbeam. From the fourth paragraph. The light beam reflected from Mahiyat and was the only thing that could be seen in the dark. The spiritual space in which the Mahiyat moved consisted of light. Light cannot be detected in the light but in the dark. For this reason, light and darkness must face each other everywhere and in every respect. From the fifth paragraph. From article number 7, lesson 2 to -4.1, the creation report. In all the multiverses, there are two kinds of energy sources. By accumulating an energy mass with a high percentage of positronic effects, even from 1 electron volt upwards in a particular biological system. For example, the human body, a number of positronic and equanomagnetics are first generated, and as the positronic energy entering the system increases, the beings of this world. For example, various viruses are created. In the opposite direction, as discussed above, we will have electronic beings. To put it colloquially, everything that we humans simply consider evil and bad produces a dark energy when its potential is converted into power. When a mass of light energy encounters it, this energy is either neutralized or its frequency is reduced so that it remains in the system as a pure property. When this force collides with another mass of positronic force, its properties are intensified, and this causes the production of a multitude of primitive dark creatures. This is also true in the opposite direction for electronic or light forces. In the universe, however, it is important to determine whether the energy is electronic or positronic when talking about energy. This fact is not yet known to scientists, and therefore, they do not take into account the eternal sources of these energies in all mathematical and physical calculations and considerations. Of course, in mathematics or Newtonian physics, there is no need to determine the primary source of energy, as in quantum mechanics this has not yet been investigated. Today, we have entered a new field of science, which we have called integrated sciences. This science, which reflects the teachings of Master Elahi, is capable of ending the Heisenberg quantum era, or at least correcting such considerations. Therefore, in all fields of integrated sciences, it is necessary to first determine whether the magnetic field in question is a positronic or an electronic magnetic field, the origin of which is one of the two energy sources discussed above. this respect, it should not be forgotten that the two sources are constantly trying to obtain information from each other, as the survival of each is always threatened by the other. Therefore, as soon as a type of virus is detected by the human body, the information about it is stored in the database in the soul. According to this data, the Bisharic soul will send the necessary instructions through the quantum cord to the thalamus, which will be used to prepare a medicine and a natural vaccine in the body. On the other hand, the positronic world is immediately informed that this virus is identified by the light element of the body, for example, the leukocytes. Therefore, the positronic beings design another organism. But this remains only a draft, since a certain amount of positronic energy is needed to produce a new virus according to this draft. This energy is only provided to the dark world after the disturbance of the balance between the two energy sources in the body, as explained above. Thus, each time a new microscopic positronic organism with properties unknown to the human body is created. What was explained above in simple terms is the main reason for the appearance of new viruses that appear from time to time and claim victims. The duration of the epidemic activity of an emerging virus and its destructive power depends entirely on the amount of positronic energy released. If, for example, millions of electron volts of energy, which we call positron volts, are released as a result of a disruption of the relative imbalance between two energy sources in favor of one positronic energy source, viruses produced from this energy demand sacrifices until the level of this negative energy is minimized. In this context, the problem is that such a virus, after being produced in its appropriate environment, for example in the host body, is transferred from one body to another. As soon as the positronic energy level drops, the severity of the epidemic decreases and the virus gradually disappears, as the body itself has found the solution and used it against the virus. While the medical world believes it has brought the disease under control. As for the coronavirus, the medical world has announced that there is currently no cure for this disease. Of course, drugs and medical advice available to control the virus are very limited. However, the general and very important conclusion offered by the considerations of the integrated sciences is this. There are two types of energy in the universe: electronic energy, the smallest value of which can be represented by 1 electron volt. Please pay attention to this equation. In the same way, there is also the positronic energy, which is shown with a positron volt. Please pay attention to this equation. What has been briefly and compactly presented in an article of 2 parts about the appearance of unknown viruses is only a small indication of the importance of the integrated sciences, which opens us the door to a new world with a very broad horizon. It is only in this world that we can promise Albert Einstein that the integrated sciences of Master Elohi bring us not one step closer to the Elder God, but miles closer. End of the second part, the last part. Certificate of this article. Research and investigation. Farah Mars Tabish. Sources. The works of Master Elohi 1895 to 1974. From the Persian article by Farah Mars Tabish.